I'm Brenda. Welcome back to my quilt room. I have a quick and easy project for you today that involves using a jelly roll. And if you don't know what a jelly roll is, it's about 3 yards of coordinating fabric that the company has put together and they roll it up. And this is a jelly roll that I picked up a few years ago at Missouri Star when I visited them. And so I'm sure when I see just the right pattern that I'll know I want to use my jelly roll. And then when I was out shopping with my daughter one weekend, I came across this in a bookstore. And it has a lot of jelly roll patterns in it. I think there's 14 or 15. 15 it says. Anyway, what I created is this jelly roll quilt that you see behind me. And in their book, which I made this pattern from, they're calling it Springtime in Paris. And I don't know where all the quilts get their names, but mine finished at 52 by 63 inches. And the squares were 6.5 inches squared. And what you do is you'll sort out, and the instructions in here, they were really easy to follow. Sort out them in pairs, sets of 3 when you open your jelly roll. Now maybe you have a lot of leftover 2.5 inch strips. And so what I did, I picked out from my scraps 3 jelly roll strips. They were 2.5 inches, and I sewed them together into a long strip, which is what I have here. And then you'll need a background fabric. And these are 3.5 inches. When you sew your strips together, you will cut them in 6.5 inch increments. And that's what you have here. And then you'll take your background square and draw a line with your ruler from corner to corner on your background square and stitch it down. Now for me, a 3.5 inch square leaves too much material to be wasted. So on my practice square and on when I did this quilt, I measured over on my background square with my ruler a 1/2 inch, and I drew a secondary line so that while I was sewing these, I could just go ahead and stitch this down, and when I go back, I will cut between my 2 sewn lines, which is what I did here. And this is the 1/2 square triangle that you end up with once you trim away. And you will end up with an entire pile of these. And I squared them up to 2.5 inches. So I'll be putting that together into another project. So you'll want to then iron and press back your flip and stitch triangle corners. Now the important thing about this particular pattern is that every single square, your background squares that you snowball your corners with, have to be the same. Every single block has to be the same. So when you're stitching this up, I suggest that you put one of these beside your sewing machine. That way you will always orient your triangles to the correct corner, because I sewed a few going the wrong direction and you cannot turn them around and make it right. So then I had to pick some strips out of my scraps to make up the difference of the 2 or 3 blocks that I had sewed in the wrong direction. So if you've been quilting or sewing for very long, you know that a lot of these quilt patterns, they're the same pattern, but they have a different name. And in this behind me, it's sort of an optical illusion. So if you'll look, you see the outline of a star. as the edges of these triangles that are on the corner come together. So there's another book that I have, and it's called Nickel Quilts. And it's called Nickel Quilts because it uses 5-inch squares or charm squares. And this particular pattern happens to be in here. But they've called it Autumn Stretched Star. But when you look at the picture, you can see it is the same pattern. They're just using 5-inch squares. What I like about this particular book and using up your 5-inch squares is they give you different sizes based on how many squares you have. So for this one, which is a lap size, I think it said you need 121 5-inch squares plus your background for making the corners in this one. I believe, yes, and there it is. I showed you the picture of the wrong one, but it's the same. Every pattern, they show you the dimensions and tell you how many squares you will need in order to make the quilt. And this uses just 5-inch squares, and you may have a whole stack of these. And so this is what the 5-inch square will look like. But it's the exact same process as the jelly roll. So you can see that. These come out to be 6.5 inches. These are 5 inches. So your quilt size will vary depending on which pattern you want to do. You may not have jelly roll strips, but you have a lot of 5-inch squares. So this is just another option of making the same quilt. It just has a different name. The quilt behind me, the jelly roll that I used is called Sunlit Blooms, and it's from Maywood Studios. And several of my jelly rolls I purchased a while back, and the fabric may no longer be available, but you may be able to find something similar. This one had more lightish strips. So for the darker prints that were the blue, I tried when I put my 3 strip sets together to always put I tried to keep my darker fabric tone toward the center of the 3 strips to not interfere with the blue that I used for my snowballing the 2 corners of my block. It was very easy to do. It didn't take that long. I used a nice wide border, and I'm not sure, I think it was 5.5 inches. And I really like it. I think it turned out really pretty. I'll be anxious to quilt some of these projects that I've been working on. So until the next time, I'll see you later.